Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. And now, here are Bob and Richard.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Our guest today is Olympic champion Connor Fields, whose specialty is BMX bicycle racing. This is a bit outside our usual subject matter on this show, but there's a lot of skill and strategy in these races, and I'm pretty sure you're going to enjoy this. We'll be talking to Connor in a few minutes. We received several letters from listeners at gamblingwithanedge@gmail.com. We're going to answer a few of those questions now. First, one listener found an electronic roulette wheel at a casino with a very low minimum and a very high maximum. The spread is so big, he's considering a martingale progression where he keeps doubling up after each loss, which will always work unless he runs up to the house limit, which is really big, or he runs out of money, which he doesn't think he's going to do. Richard?
Well, the short answer is write this down, tattoo it on your arm, repeat it every night before you go to bed. No betting system can overcome a game with a negative expectation. It doesn't matter how big the limit is. No betting system can overcome a game with a negative expectation. So the answer is you will go broke if you attempt this on this machine.
You will reach the limit.
Yes, it will happen.
Maybe.
No matter how unlikely you think it is, eventually it will happen.
And it might be a year and a half. Might be.
Or it might be the first day. That's the problem. You don't know.
And it's it would be 5.25% against you on this machine if you flat betted, and 5.25% if you use the martingale.
Right.
All right. Another listener wants to know what apps you use, Richard, to get your gambling news.
Yeah, he had asked about an app I had recommended on the air a couple of years ago, and things change so quickly on the internet that I'm no longer using what I used 2 years ago. But what I use now is, I use two things. One is an app called Feedly, Feedly, and that is a news feed aggregator. So if there are particular sites that you visit, like gamblingwithanedge.com, you can add this into your Feedly, and every day it will go out, well, multiple times a day. Anytime something new is added to the site, it'll show up in your Feedly. And because I follow dozens of sites, this is one place where I can find them all. So I like that a lot. You can use it on your computer or on your phone. And then the other thing I use is an app called Flipboard. And Flipboard, more than just individual websites, you can give it topics. So I can have a topic of Las Vegas, I can have a topic of technology, and it goes out and finds articles currently on those particular topics. So those are the two things I use, Flipboard and Feedly.
And on Feedly, you have to, if you wanted, for example, news from, I'll pick one, cardplayer.com, you would physically have to put that into your Feedly list, or it will ignore it. But the other one, if cardplayer.com has an article about the World Series of Poker in Las Vegas, your other one would pick it up.
Yes,
is that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
All right. Give a third question. It's also for Richard. What do you think about betting an additional half unit in blackjack? That is, instead of betting exactly 1 unit or 2 units or 3 units, sometimes betting 1.5 or 2.5 or 3.5 when the true count calls for it. Is this a good idea?
I think you're focused on the wrong things. This is not where the money is. So, but as a general rule of thumb for card counters, I would say if you are in doubt about a play that deviates from basic strategy, you're not if the count is so close that you're not sure whether to deviate from basic strategy or not, then always lean toward making the basic strategy play. And when your count makes you unsure of what the proper bet is, say you're using a $50 unit and you're not sure whether you should be betting 125 or 150 or 100, lean toward betting more. So if it's a bet more. If it's a play, stick to basic strategy. And as I say, worrying about half units, you're stepping over dollars to pick up pennies.
I like that phrase. The last question for Richard. A blackjack player was playing basic strategy with a lot of good basic strategy players that he didn't know. As a one-time deal, he saw the dealer's hold cards. And it was a 10 card, and the dealer had a 10 card face up. So he knew the dealer had 20. Player had a hard 18. And he goes to hit that 18 because he knew 20 would lose. Or he would lose to a 20. The other players and the dealer at the table gave him a lot of static about, you can't hit an 18. That's a really stupid play. Don't do that. Please don't. You're going to ruin it for everybody. Blah, blah, blah. He didn't want to say anything specific because he hoped the dealer would flash more cards in the future. So he ended up just standing on his 18, taking his guaranteed loss to shut the table up. In the future, how should he take advantage of this without drawing a lot of undue attention?
So first of all, I'm assuming they didn't have surrender, or that would have been the easier option and the better option. The guy is not a whole card player. He's not a professional. And if this was a one-time thing where he did not think the dealer was going to show the whole card again, then I would just say, oh, you inadvertently showed me the card. You have a 10 in the hole. And and hit the 18. Now, if there is a chance that the dealer's going to expose the whole card, well, then just don't hit the 18. I mean, your gain from hitting it is so tiny, and you risk not just the flack from the other players, but you risk the casino or the dealer figuring out that that's what happened, that you're able to see the dealer's whole card. So, you just don't do it. You don't hit a hard 18. As I say, unless it's like a one-time thing, and then you can just say, oh, when you pull the card out, you showed it to me.
And the dealer and the players can hear that, but the eye in the sky can't.
Correct. Unless you're playing in England where they have microphones on every table.
Uh-huh. Which has other problems.
Yes.
Very good. Let's talk to our guest. Connor Fields began BMX cycling when he was 7 years old. Somehow he wasted the first 6 years of his life. He's done pretty well since then, capturing multiple world championships and a 2016 Olympic gold medal. Connor Fields, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Now let's assume that many of our listeners are unfamiliar with BMX racing. So take us through a typical race lasting maybe 35 seconds from the top of the ramp through the finish line.
Yep. So BMX started in the 1970s, and basically what it was kids trying to emulate their favorite motorcycle racers, riding over dirt hills and dirt jumps. And from there, it kind of took off and it became its own sport. So basic rules of BMX is that there's a starting line, there's a finish line, and then in between there's going to be some turns, some jumps. The track is made of dirt. Sometimes they will actually asphalt the berms so as to give you more grip. Lap times usually consist of 30 to 40 seconds, depending on the course. And they come in all shapes and sizes. Here in Vegas, we've got one of the smallest tracks I've ever been to that, a 3 or 4 year old can make it around. And, at the Olympics, we're riding tracks that there might only be 100 people in the world that could make it around.
Okay. On the first day of Olympic BMX competition, you had individual time trials, and it was used for seeding purposes. The fastest 32 guys moved on. How many of the other 31 guys did you know? Did you consider friends? Did they have a realistic chance of winning?
I knew every rider. We have a World Cup series that we compete on every year. This year, for example, we have stops in Holland, Argentina, and Belgium, and the U.S. So, it's the same circuit, and you've been racing the same riders, and you know everybody. So I would say I'm friendly with nearly all of them. There's only a couple of them that I maybe don't like. But then for the most part, I was friendly with most of them. And then BMX is one of those sports. It's a little bit different from swimming or track and field, where everybody's fastest time and how fast everybody is. And basically, like, if everybody does what they should do, this guy's going to win. There's so many variables. There's so much that can happen in BMX, and it's so hard to be perfect that it's kind of every time you race. What we say in BMX is, like, if you're in the gate, you have a chance. And to be honest, going into the Olympics, there was 6 to 8 guys where if they won, nobody would have been surprised. And then there was probably another 5 to 7 guys after that like, it wouldn't have been like a complete shock if they won, just because, in the final, of the 8 guys in the final, 5 of us had won a World Cup at some point in our career. So if any of the 5 of us would have won, it wouldn't have been a big shock.
Is the prize money in BMX, can you make a living off prize money, or is it only through sponsorship?
Bit of both. For us, the prize money is definitely a big proponent of what we earn, but not in the U.S., but in a lot of places around the world. The athletes are actually funded through their Olympic committee and through their government. So I'll use England as an example. England's Olympic team is funded by the lottery. So a portion of the money from the lottery goes into supporting British sport. So those athletes that ride for Team GB, they'll get basically a salary and it's tax-free to compete for their country. And then obviously they have to hit certain benchmarks, and there's certain things that they have to do. There's also appearances in the media or with kids and things like that they have to do in order to claim that. So for them, they don't rely as much on sponsors, and then the prize money is kind of gravy for those guys. For me or any other American, we don't really get any funding from the government for our salaries. So for us, it's all sponsor based and prize money, but it's pretty feast or famine. There's only a handful of guys that are doing well enough to not have a side job or not live at mom and dad's at 25. I'd say maybe 10 people making over, minimum wage. That's about it.
There's things in common with video poker players. Okay. Now, many of these races, they have crashes where the cyclists go down, sometimes several. Mm-hmm. For the top tier cyclist, how often do you crash, and how frequently can you walk away from a crash basically unhurt?
For someone like me or the other guys that are at the top, we could probably ride all year and maybe only have one crash by ourselves, and I say that because, like, I could ride 1,000 times, and I might only crash once due to my own mistake, because I know my limits. I know how fast to go. I know how to judge jumps. But when you start crashing is when you introduce all the other riders, and you can't predict or control what they're going to do. So when they, maybe take a line away at a turn, or they cross jump in front of you or something like that, that's when you run the risk of crashing. For me, in 2016, I crashed twice, 3 times. I crashed 3 times in the year, and I raced, I think, probably 12 events. So, I mean, most of the time, more often than not, you walk away with a little bit of road rash. I mean, we wear pads, we wear helmets and all that. Every now and then you do get injured, but, to put it in perspective, I didn't have an injury worse than road rash or just getting, some bumps and bruises from 2011 through 2016. I went 5 years without a serious injury. So, it's a little bit of it's just luck of the draw, to be honest. I mean, I've seen guys hit the deck so hard that I think they might be dead, and they get up and they're fine. And then I've seen guys have the silliest crashes where they basically tip over in the wind, or they look like they just barely fall over, but just the way that they, whether it's the way they twisted their arm or the way that they hit their shoulder, they just happened to fall in a way that injured them. So it's just a little bit of the luck of the draw.
But you did have a major injury in 2016. A couple months before the Olympics, you broke your wrist, which has got to be a pretty important joint in BMX. So how did you get back into the race and even qualify for the team after a broken wrist?
So the way that they qualify the U.S. team, there's 3 spots. The first spot is the guy who's the highest ranked rider, June 1st, Olympic year. Second spot is the guy who wins the Olympic trials. And then the third spot is a committee selection on the riders that are left after the first 2. I was the highest ranked guy before my injury in March. But after that, I missed a few big key races, and I lost that ranking. And I also wasn't healthy enough to race in the trials. So my only way onto the team was to get the committee selection. And there was a lot of people that didn't think I should be the committee selection just because I was coming off of an injury. But ultimately they viewed my results in the past 6 years versus, all the other options they had, and they decided that I was the best chance. So I ended up getting the committee selection, and that's how I made it on the team. But yeah, I had a training accident in March, and I fell and I put my hand out and I broke a bone in my wrist. That took quite a while to heal. So yeah, it wasn't fun, but it all had a happy ending.
In the UK, here in the US, I'm sure the answer is no, but in the UK, where they're a little more progressive than we are, they bet on a lot of things, and there's a bookmaker shop on every corner. Is there gambling on BMX over there?
Not that I know of, other than at the Olympics. I mean, I'm sure that there's people running little side bets, during the races and that kind of thing. But there's not like you can't walk into the sports book on Friday before the race and make a bet, other than during the Olympics. During the Olympics, they have they've got a lot of websites where you can bet on BMX. I think sometimes you can do it at the World Championships, but those would be the only 2 like organized events that you could gamble at. I think they should make it more gambling. Like, I think that's a great idea. I think like we're a little bit like horse racing, in that like it's super exciting and you really don't always know who's going to win. And I think that would be something that would make our sport way more exciting, is if you could bet on it.
Well, you're preaching to the choir here.
Now, rank the following attributes for a successful racer: muscularity, quickness, aggressiveness, balance, discipline, intelligence, willingness to come on our radio show, nerves of steel, and did I leave something out as to what's important?
You might have to repeat those again. The number one thing was intelligence, I would say. I mean, you have to be smart enough to know, and I'd be able to identify what you need at any given time. and then also like who to surround yourself with, and how to handle certain situations. For me, I would always put intelligence as number one. The best athletes in the world aren't necessarily book smart, but they're all career smart. They all understand what they need at any given time, and make good decisions about who they surround themselves with, and their public image, and all that. You got to be really intelligent. After that, I'd say it's aggressiveness. I mean, we are a little bit like fighters in that you can go out and just get literally knocked out, but then you got to get right back in the ring, next chance you get. And it's a full contact sport. You're literally lining up in the gate with 7 other dudes who want to put you on the ground. So it's a pretty ruthless sport. So you have to be real aggressive. So I'd say intelligence and aggressiveness would be the first two. And then after that, balance is really important. You have to be really good at, getting over the jumps. I mean, the muscle stuff's important too, but ultimately, like, you could be the strongest guy in the gym. You could be the best guy at squats and deadlifts, but if you can't jump a 40-foot jump with 6 other dudes right next to you, then it's all for naught. You have to have that balance. So of the ones that you gave me, I can remember because you gave me a lot.
I did.
I would say it would go intelligence, aggressiveness, balance, quickness, strength would be the order I'd put it in.
That's actually that was a surprising order. I would not have thought intelligence was right up there. It's I know your dad. He's a really bright guy, and I'm not surprised that you are intelligent. But it seems relatively simple as a sport. All you have to do is reach the bottom of the ramp in first place and stay there. There's nothing to it.
It's less about the race strategy. The intelligence, I mean, more of like, for example, you have to hire a trainer or a coach. And so you have to be intelligent in identifying which guy is going to mesh with your personality and which guy's theories do you believe in. Or, you have to decide whether or not, what events do you want to do leading into the Olympics, and how is that going to affect your mental and physical, well-being going in. And the guys who are always the most successful, they might not be, like I said, book smart, street the traditional thought of what intelligence is, but they have career intelligence. They're able to figure out how to be the best BMX racer that they can be. And the guys who are like, I call them the dumb athletes, the ones who just say, yes, coach, how many, coach, and just kind of blindly follow, they can get good, but the best guys are never like that. The best guys are always smart.
So it's making good career decisions is kind of what you're meaning by intelligence here.
Yeah. Okay. Not like
training. How often are you training 6 days a week like any other athlete?
For us, it changes a little bit depending on what time of the season it is. In the off season, we train a bit more because we're trying to build up some strength and some speed. During the season, we might train a little bit less, but I think that's the same as every sport. For me, I've experimented with different volume loads and how much to do. And for me, I found that 5 days a week is the best for me. And then the 2 days off are important because if you think about it, you're not going to go out and ride BMX when you're super tired. It's not like a running sport when you can go do it when you're tired and you're not necessarily going to really injure yourself. If you go out on the track and you're, exhausted, you run the risk of injury. So you have to flirt with that balance of training hard and making an impact, but also training safely. And so for me, I'll do 5 days a week, and I'll have usually it's either Wednesday or Thursday, and then Sunday I'll be off. And those recovery days are important for me, just so I feel rested when I'm out training, and I feel like I've got some gas when I'm out there training.
Are the clothes you wear, from your helmets down to your boots, similar or different from clothes worn by cyclists in other disciplines?
Completely different. The only thing that would be similar would be the shoes. We clip in. So we actually, for the most part, use mountain bike shoes. Those are the best clip shoes that we have available. But the rest of our stuff, we actually are more similar to motocross than we would be to cycling. We don't wear Lycra. Lycra is actually banned. In our sport, you have to be able to grab 1 inch of material. There was a time a few years back when people started wearing Lycra, and they thought it was hurting the sport because part of BMX is like it's supposed to be cool and it's supposed to be hip. And they don't want it to turn into, road cycling where everybody's got these aerodynamic helmets and Lycra and all that. So, and we just have to wear, not baggy, but a little bit baggier stuff. And then we actually wear motocross pants for the most part and long sleeve jerseys. Then underneath, everybody's different, but I wear elbow pads and knee pads. That would be almost more similar to like a skateboarder.
Now, in the seeding runs, which are time trials, one racer at a time, and nobody's out there elbowing you or fighting for position, presumably there's a lot less chance that you're going to crash during a seeding run.
Yeah.
Do you wear the same clothes and ride the same bike for the seeding runs as you would for a race where there's going to be a lot more contact?
As far as clothes go, yeah, I wear the same clothes. And then, because you can never account for like a flat tire, and a flat tire makes you crash, and you'd feel pretty stupid if you were like, oh, I won't wear my pads on this run just because there's no one else around. So you usually wear the same stuff. And then the bike stuff, I've done some experimenting with different sorts of, whether it's a different gear ratio, a different tire pattern, different setup on the time trials. And I know other people have too, but for the most part, you set your bike up to be the fastest that it can be, and it's going to be the fastest whether it's with people or it's by itself. So I haven't lately, in the last few years, I haven't really changed anything between time trials and racing.
Okay. Let's say you could ride a particular course in 35 seconds flat using your own bike tweaked to your exact preferences. Somehow, just before the race, something happened to your bike, and you had to borrow a teammate's bike, which was tweaked to his preferences. How close to the 35 flat could you get in his bike?
I'd probably be like a second off, depending on whose bike it was. If it was somebody who was a similar build to me, if it was another person that was 6 feet tall and had a bike that wasn't super different, then it might be even less than a second. But then, for example, we've got one guy on our team who's 6'3", and he's got this super big bike that I would not be able to ride well at all. So that would probably be like 2 to 3 seconds off. Or, if I had to pick up somebody who was, 5'8", pick up their bike, it would be completely different. So it just depends. But for the most part, it's not like it's the bikes are different, but they're all fairly similar. Like we all run similar setups because we've all discovered what's the fastest setup. So for the most part, our bikes are relatively similar with minor changes based on rider preference, whether, they like their handlebars a little bit more back, or maybe they like a different tire tread pattern. But yeah, for the most part, I could grab, most everybody's bike and not be too far off.
Would that also be true of could grab a bike from say a French competitor who was the same size as you?
Yeah. I've actually had it happen before. So my teammate and we have a domestic series that we compete in, as well as the World Cup series. And my teammate on my we have the same bike sponsor. He's French. I actually had a flat tire last year at an event. I found it like when I was in the starting line, and I actually used his bike and I won that heat. So we literally have the exact same bike, and our setups are only like a couple of centimeters off on everything. So like our bikes are super similar, and it's the same for any country. It's not like the Swiss guys have the super, different setup from the Colombians. It's all pretty similar. Because, again, we've all found, like, what works, and we stick to what works.
Connor, you're from Las Vegas, and I happen to have noticed that there are quite a few BMX courses here in Vegas, Henderson area.
Yeah.
Is this a BMX mecca or something, or is this sprouting up all over the country?
It's not necessarily a mecca. It's really grown in the last few years. So when I started racing back in the early 2000s, there was only 2 courses in town, and now there's 4. Plus there's some like practice courses, so there's up to 5 and 6. So it's been pretty cool to see BMX grow, within Las Vegas. And right now there's, over 1,000 kids in the valley who go out to local BMX tracks and ride, and they're all ages from 3 years old up to parents of these kids who go out there. So it's been pretty cool to see it grow. Vegas is definitely one of the top 10 places in the country. Florida is pretty good. Southern California is pretty good. A lot of the warm weather places are good. Minnesota is good as well. Surprisingly, they've got like indoor facilities up there. But yeah, Vegas is definitely one of the best places in the States to be for a young rider.
Now, Team USA has got to have a lot of bike mechanics to keep all the bikes in tip-top shape. Do you let these trained professionals do their work, or do you want to do it yourself?
No, I'm happy to. If I trust them, I'm happy to let them do it. I hate working on my bike. It's like my least favorite thing. If I don't know them, I usually won't trust them until I see them work on some bikes first. But we've been using the same mechanic for about 2 years, and then before that, we had the same guy for about 4. So I trust them to do whatever they need to do to my bike. I actually would trust them more than I would trust myself because they're more experienced at it. But our bikes are pretty simple. Mountain bikes and road bikes where there's gear changing or suspension are much more complex. We run a fixed gear bike and we run no suspension. So for us, it's not super complex.
How different are the bikes in, say, the 2016 Olympics compared to the 2012 Olympics?
Not that different. There's a couple of little things that have changed. At least like on my bike, I can compare. There's maybe 3 or 4 things that are different. But for the most part, not much. For the most part, they're pretty much the same.
And what does a top BMX bike cost?
If you wanted to go out and buy my exact bike, it would probably cost you around $3,500 to $4,000 to buy every bit of it piece by piece.
Now, in the Olympic finals, you and teammate Nick Long were basically neck and neck with 10 seconds to go.
Mm-hmm.
He faltered slightly, ending up in 4th place, missing out on the bronze and a photo finish.
Yep.
You took the gold. Had you been tied with Nick with, say, 3 seconds to go, and you felt the only way you could win was to elbow him a bit, would you have elbowed your own teammate to win the gold?
100%. I wouldn't have even thought about it. We don't have any teammates out there. It's an individual sport. We're from the U.S., so we're racing for the same country. But ultimately, if he beats me or if a guy from France beat me, I'm still getting beat. And there's no team event. There's no team medal. It's a completely individual sport. And, I would have rather elbowed an Australian rider or somebody, not an American if that was the choice. But if the choice was to push an American off the track and that meant that I was going to win, I'm going to do it. I wouldn't seek it out. I'm not going to try to impede them or try to mess them up. But ultimately at the end of the day, I'm there to do the best that I can do. And the 7 other riders in the gate, no matter what color jersey, they could all be wearing, all black jerseys and they would all still be the same to me. It's all just people that are trying to beat me.
You mentioned horse racing, and there is a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on in horse racing. Is that a common thing, elbowing each other? And
yeah, it is. It's common, but at the same time, it's one of those things where you have to be smart about it. So anytime that you're elbowing or touching another rider, you're slowing yourself down. The best riders don't seek contact. The best, the smartest riders, you try to pass, for example, how I did in Rio, you try to pass without contact. And if you go watch the pass that the Dutchman made on Nick for second, he didn't even touch him. He just got around him and went, because it actually slows you down when you touch. Some of the more inexperienced riders, or the riders, in my opinion, who aren't as smart, will seek the contact, but contact just slows both parties down. So I think that it just depends on the move, and it depends on what part of the track you're on and all that. But ultimately, you want to avoid contact for the most part, unless you absolutely need to make it, because it almost never ends well for either party.
But you can punch him in the head or all kinds of things.
There's no like, you can't take your hands or feet off the bike and kick. And then if it's like a blatant T-bone, like you're not even trying to pass, you were like deemed that you were just trying to crash them, then you would possibly run the risk of getting disqualified. But contact's legal. It's fully legal. There's no penalty for it. There's almost no rules. And that's what, as a racer, it kind of sucks, but as a fan watching, it makes it super exciting because, for example, what happened to me in London, the guy that was next to me in the starting grid, he just ran into me on like the second pedal. So like he messed himself up, but he completely messed me up too. But as a fan, it opens it up for somebody else to win. So I guess it is similar to horse racing in that like anything goes pretty much.
Now, London was the 2012 Olympics.
Yeah.
And at that point, you, going into the final race, you had a shot to win until that happened. This year, 2016, Sam Willoughby, who's an Australian rider, had a hell of a preliminaries and everything, and he was in a good spot to win until he got messed up on the finals. After it was over, did you and Sam swap notes at how similar your 2012 was to his 2016?
Well, Sam and I have a long history of competing against each other, and we go back, and we aren't the kind, we wouldn't, he was congratulatory and he was very nice after I won and said good job and everything, but we don't have the type of relationship to where we would have talked about that kind of thing. But we were both aware. We basically swapped how our events went. So in London, I won 5 of the 6 preliminary, was in lane 1 in the final, and then didn't get a medal. He was hot and cold throughout the day, was like the 5 seed in the final and got second. And then this time around, I wasn't necessarily hot and cold. I'd gotten seconds in my semifinals, and I was, I moved through the quarters as the 2 seed, the semis as the 2 seed, and I was in the finals. But I turned it on in the finals, kind of how he did in London, and then he made the mistake in the final, how I did in London, and we kind of swapped over what happened, which was interesting. But it's BMX. I mean, when you're in lane 1, it's the hardest position to be in because you have no track on the inside of you. You have no margin for error. If you're not perfect, somebody's going to be able to get in front of you. But again, all you have to do is be even with everybody, and then you're going to get the whole shot. If you think about the geometry of it, if you're on the outside of the starting grid, the apex of the turn is going to be farther from you. So you're going to have to literally be, a couple meters faster than them to get there first. So it's a catch-22 when you're on the inside, and it's really tough to be there.
Now, when you compete, you have this big Monster Energy logo on your helmet and a number of patches with the name of various sponsors all over your uniform.
Yep.
Without going into exact numbers, did your Olympic gold translate into big bonuses from the sponsors? And does it lead to more sponsors and or bigger sponsorship deals?
To an extent, yes. I mean, it depends on your definition of big. Like, by no means am I going to be able to retire off of my wins or anything like that. But, I definitely was able to earn some money. I mean, I'll tell you the public stuff because this is all public. Basically, the U.S. Olympic Committee, if you win a gold medal, a silver or a bronze, the USOC bonuses you with $25,000, $15,000, $10,000 for the medals. And then in the past, you've been 1099 for that, but this time it was pretty cool. Congress actually passed a movement where if you make less than $1 million a year, and I fall into that category,
me too.
You actually don't get taxed on that, which I thought was pretty cool because it kind of sucked. Like the U.S. would be like, "Oh, you want a gold medal? Here's $25,000," and then 6 months later they'd be like, "Oh, hey, give us $8,000 back." So yeah, you get that, and then USA Cycling or USA Track and Field or USA Wrestling, they'll some of the governing bodies of sport will bonus on top of that. USA Cycling is 15, 10, 5 for medals. So I think just between those, I got like $40,000. But so I mean, which is awesome, which is good. But again, by no means am I going to like retire. But to put that into perspective, there's two athletes who got a gold medal for wrestling, and USA Wrestling wrote them both a $250,000 check. So, and then I know like track and field. If you are not, I don't know track and field's numbers, but swimming's numbers is like 80, 60, 40 for medals. So like when Phelps got 8 gold medals, he got 8 times 80. So it's, $640,000 just from those medal bonuses. So, that's kind of what comes when you're one of the smaller sports in the games. But at the end of the day, I made in 34 seconds what a lot of people make in a year. So I'm not going to complain.
Well,
BMX is a young man's sport. What do you see yourself doing 10 years from now?
I'm in school right now. I go to UNLV. I have 3 more classes to take before I can apply to Lee Business School. I have to take a math class and 2 economics classes, and then I'm going to apply to Lee Business, and I'm going to study. I'm thinking just a basic business administration. Possibly looking into minoring or maybe even majoring in accounting. I'm not sure, but ultimately I want to work. I want to work for the agency that I work with right now, and possibly even one day be an agent for action sports athletes. Most stick and ball sports like baseball, football, basketball, you need to have a law degree, but in action sports, it's more about the connections you have and who you know. In 2020 at the next Olympics, they've included surfing and skateboarding. So from my point of view, there's more action sports going into the Olympics to attract my generation in. And I think it would be a good fit for me to be an agent, and work with some of these athletes. And, I could look them in the eye and say, hey, I've been there before. I've been to the Olympics. I'm an action sports athlete. I know what it's like. I know what you're going through. And, as an athlete myself, I would be more inclined to work with somebody who I know had been there and done that rather than just somebody who had gone to school and read it from a book.
Does that mean you will not be competing in 2020 in BMX, that you've retired?
No. 2020 will be my last one. I'm gonna do. I guess now it's 3.5 more years. And then after 2020, unless at that point I still want to do it, I'll keep going. But as of now, the rough draft is to just push through 2020, and then hopefully at that point be finished with school, or at least close to finishing with school, and I can kind of transition into whatever's next. I think BMX is a young man's sport. It's not necessarily because you age out and you can't do it anymore, but I think what happens is, when you're 30 and you look at that starting ramp, and then you look to your left and you see a bunch of 19-year-olds, and you look to your right and you see a bunch of 20-year-olds that are all willing to die for it. I think you kind of think to yourself, most 30-year-olds or older riders I've seen kind of just think twice. And when you start thinking twice, that's when you're pretty much done. And I think that's what changes. It's not the physical side that you can't do it anymore. It's just that for the risk isn't worth the reward anymore, especially when you're 30, you're usually starting to get married and maybe have a kid, and, you think twice.
Now, Lance Armstrong, he was disgraced by doping scandal, but he was an extremely talented road cyclist, and most of our audience knows who he is. But he didn't train for BMX, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Which is a sprint event. If you could ride a particular time trial in 35 seconds flat, how fast could Armstrong have ridden it in his prime assuming he didn't train specifically for BMX?
He wouldn't have been able to make it around our course. He wouldn't have tried. He would have been smart enough not to try. I mean, the first jump when you come off the starting ramp is 40 feet long, and he rode a road bike and never left the ground. So he wouldn't have even attempted to make a lap around our course. Not that he physically couldn't, but just the technique side of things, he wouldn't have been able to do it. You have to train. There's literally 100 guys in the world who can make it around the Olympic course, because it's that big and that difficult to make it around. But I mean, if he was to race on, for example, say one of the courses in Las Vegas that kids ride on, and that doesn't have these big gap jumps and things like that, he would be able to make it around, and he would probably be better than average, but it's just such a different sport. And there's no translation whatsoever.
And similarly, Tour de France, you would have no chance at all.
Absolutely. I wouldn't even try.
All right. We're talking to Connor Fields, 2016 Olympic BMX cycling champion. We're going to break for a few commercials, and then we have a lot more questions for Connor. The South Point has more than 10,000 games, returning more than 99%. This is more than anybody else has. In March, the major promotion is for players who already have slot club cards and receive mailers. Instead of collecting your usual mailer once a week, you collect it twice a week. And if you collect all 8 times in the first 4 weeks, you get a double mailer on Monday, April 3rd. So this is a total of 9 pickups instead of 4 for 10 times the amount, instead of 4 times the amount. The 9th class in the current 10-week semester of free video poker classes will be held Wednesday, March 22nd at noon in the Silverado Lounge. This lounge is the first one you come to when entering from the parking garage. The class is 944 bonus deuces wild, returning 99.45%. Bonus deuces wild contains elements of regular deuces wild in it, but it pays more for 5 of a kinds, with the big bonus going to 5 aces. To pay for the higher return for 5 of a kinds, the payout for straights is cut in half. This results in a number of strategic changes in the way the game is played. At videopoker.com, it's the best place to play lots of games. If you sign up for the gold membership, $8.95 a month or $79.95 a year, this allows you to get correction on most of the games. The game of the week is Ultimate X Spin Poker. This is a new game. It's a 10 coins per line game, which means 90 coins in all because Spin Poker is a 9-line game. It is played like regular Ultimate X video poker, where you earn multipliers this time and they're played off next time. In regular Ultimate X, the multipliers for 10 play are greater than the multipliers for 5 play, which are greater than the multipliers for triple play. Well, the Spin Poker Ultimate X multipliers are lower still. For a given pay schedule, Spin Poker Ultimate X returns less than regular Ultimate X. This is not necessarily a showstopper for intelligent players. A casino could, for example, offer a 9-5 version of a game in regular Ultimate X and offer 9-6 in Spin Poker Ultimate X to make up for the lower multipliers. But you'd have to work out your own strategy. All the strategy published are for the 10-play multipliers, which are quite a bit higher than what you'll find in the Spin Poker version. All right, we're back with Connor Fields. Your event in the Olympics occurred over 3 days, halfway through the second week of the Olympics. Plenty of time to get totally distracted before it was time for business. When did your team arrive in Rio, and how do you stay focused when there's so many other athletes around, many of whom were already finished with their events and they were ready to party?
Well, we actually didn't arrive until 2 days before our event, just for that particular reason. We flew in last minute, and stayed away from the distractions and stayed away from all the dramas and all that kind of stuff. And then, so once we do get there, you've only got 2-3 days before you get going. So it all happens pretty quickly.
Were you in the Olympic Village, or did they have someplace else for you to stay?
No, we were in the village. And then what they actually do is, for the most part, if you compete in the very beginning of the games, once you're done, they'll actually send you home, just so you don't become a distraction for all the people that are still competing. Unless your sport is a tournament sport and you're there the whole time, usually if you're competing in the first half, you do the openings, you compete, and they send you home. If you compete in the second half, you arrive late, you compete, and then you do the closing ceremonies, and that's what we did.
Your father, Mike Fields, vice president of videopoker.com, and has been a guest on this show a couple times. Was he in Rio with you?
Yeah, he was down there with me.
He tells me he's your biggest fan. Does it feel that way to you? And before you answer, as a bit of a request, his company is one of the sponsors for this show, and it would be a bit awkward if you threw him under the bus just now.
No, he's definitely my biggest fan. He's always been there for me. He's always done everything he can to, help me reach success and help me be successful. And it was a really special moment in Rio when we crossed the finish line, and I was able to see him, and he was able to be there and enjoy that with me. So he's my biggest fan, and he still comes and watches me race. He came to a race in February, just last month.
Yeah, I've been hearing Connor Fields stories for more than 20 years from your old man. He's some of them probably been true. I don't know. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the air, taking time out of your schedule, and we thank you very, very much for being here. Thank you, Connor. Thank you, Richard. Go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody.